Some of the most interesting aspects of the cosmos, including incredible coincidences within our very own solar system, are completely left out of all academic teachings and are virtually unknown to the masses. In fact, there is significant reason to suggest that ancient human civilization were aware of these cosmic coincidences, as I'll be discussing in this video. Let me start by discussing Ceres and a few other fascinating topics to help me connect the dots for you as I build upon the argument that ancient civilization was aware of key details of the cosmos and our own solar system. We've all seen the famous white spots discovered on the surface of Ceres in 2015. If you're not familiar, Ceres is the largest object in the asteroid belt, which of course is located between Mars and Jupiter. I think we all remember when the story first broke a few years ago, with the initial photos coming back, creating tremendous shock among scientists, and this story made headlines throughout the world. I remember seeing the first photos and how so many people thought, wait a second, are those lights? What is that? This of course became the subject of discussion and debate among the conspiracy community, with people suggesting that it's an alien base. But as more pictures came in over the next few days, we got a much better look at it, and scientists have theorized that it could be anything from volcanic activity, geysers, ice, salt, or even diamond deposits. To make a long story short, scientists believe that these spots are sodium carbonate, which is a type of salt, leading scientists to believe that Ceres may have had an ocean, which of course raises many questions. Like I mentioned, Ceres is in the main asteroid belt, and of course we have two asteroid belts. The other is the Kuiper belt, located in the outer solar system, which extends from the orbit of Neptune to approximately 50 astronomical units from the Sun. The Kuiper belt is actually much larger and contains much more mass than the main asteroid belt located between Mars and Jupiter. Now I, for one, do not agree with the leading mainstream explanation for how the asteroid belts were formed, which is that during the initial formation of the solar system, a 10th planet tried to form between Mars and Jupiter, but due to the strong gravitational forces of Jupiter, it was unable to form into a planet. I think it's far more likely that what we're looking at is a destroyed planet or moon of some kind. I also think that this is what turned Mars into what it is today. We know that Mars once had massive lakes, rivers, and oceans, but something happened and we don't know what. But I, like many others, suspect that life once existed on Mars. But I also think that this event, whatever it was, may have happened far more recently than billions of years ago, and I've discussed in multiple other videos on how Mars somehow retained water channels, rivers, and lake beds despite nearly 4 billion years, according to NASA, of wind and sand erosion. And although Mars's atmosphere is far less dense than that of Earth's, NASA scientists have stated that dust and sand particles still travel up to 70 miles an hour, and take that into account with Mars, having global sandstorms which have been known to last longer than 3 months on end and consume the entire planet continuously. What also must be mentioned is that Mars has literally millions of dust devils every single day. So yeah, I think there's more to this story, and I find it interesting that NASA has contradicted themselves numerous times involving the erosion on Mars. It just doesn't seem to make sense that water channels and rivers that existed nearly 4 billion years ago would survive, 4 billion years of dust devils and global sandstorms. At a minimum, would be covered up or the sides would be eroded. And I've discussed these details in other videos, but back to the asteroid fields and how they were made. Some will say that the entire mass of the asteroid belt is not enough to be that of a planet or a moon, but really nobody could say that with any type of certainty, considering that, they don't have prior knowledge of how big these objects would have been, nor do they know how fast or from what direction or angle the impacts would have happened. Obviously, the forces of a collision would be mind-boggling, and most of the debris would be blasted out in almost every direction into the universe, but only a small amount would be retained in orbit, and that's why I suspect that the Kuiper belt is the remains of that collision, which were not able to escape the gravitational influence of the Sun. Ultimately, nobody knows how these belts were created, but there is newfound evidence to support my claim that it was a planetary collision. You may have seen headlines from about a week ago discussing how a meteorite was discovered with nanodiamonds inside of it, far larger and more complex than ever found before due to their chemistry, and leading scientists are suggesting that this is leftovers from a 10th planet that once existed in the solar system and was destroyed approximately 4.5 billion years ago. Now let's be clear, nobody can say what was going on in this solar system even 1,000,000 years ago, much less 4.5 billion years ago. And I'm not suggesting that the solar system isn't billions of years in age. I'm simply pointing this out because it's an example of the typical arrogance that exists too often in the scientific community and has existed throughout history. But here's the thing. They're saying that this meteor with the nanodiamonds must have moved into the asteroid belt after the collision. So wait a second. Why are scientists so committed to excluding the likely possibility that the asteroid belt was formed from a destroyed planetoid of some kind? This is not to say that no scientists have discussed the possibility, but it is without a doubt considered a fringe possibility. And this is something I've researched quite a bit, and it's honestly a bit disturbing how many scientists completely scoff at this possibility. Yet, the most recent scientific evidence actually supports the theory of a planetary collision forming the asteroid belt. But for some reason, most of the articles on this newly found meteorite mentioned absolutely nothing about the asteroid belt whatsoever. And I actually had to go searching to find an example of it, which I found here in the New York Times article. By the way, if there indeed was some sort of planetary or moon collision which created the asteroid belts, and if it happened far more recently, perhaps tens of thousands of years ago, this would explain various myths and legends of the war in the heavens, as well as cataclysmic events that have happened here on Earth. So the next thing I want to discuss is Mars's moon Phobos, and there is an incredible anomaly on this moon which seldom gets any attention from the scientific or academic community since its discovery. There is a monolith, which scientists say must be a boulder, which is massive. In fact, it's 90 meters in height, or nearly 300 feet tall, and it is somehow standing straight up. How and what made that happen? For something so long and narrow to be completely upright is incredible. But it's even more fascinating when you take what Buzz Aldrin said about it on live TV a few years ago, something that the mainstream news networks have completely ignored. And he stated, "There's a monolith on Mars's moon, a very unusual structure, and when people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there?" I mean, whether you believe he went to the moon or not, the very fact that Buzz Aldrin said this should raise some eyebrows. And pair it with the fact that this unusual anomaly is not taught in schools and most of the public are completely unaware of it. I mean, I find that interesting. I mean, if they did think it's just a boulder, I think it would be getting a lot more attention. I mean, if something like this existed here on Earth, which it doesn't. I mean, we've never seen any type of boulder of that size or shape standing straight up like that, not even close. But if there was, it would be a freaking tourist attraction. I mean, can you imagine? Now, I don't know what it is, and I'm not suggesting that it's an ancient obelisk like others have, or that it's evidence that ancient humans are originally from Mars, although I think that anything's possible. What I do know is that I'm curious, I want to know what it is, and I want my taxpayer money to be spent on taking better photos of it so we can figure out what it is. I mean, really, this is the best photo we can get? Some grainy, blurred photo? The next thing I want to discuss is Saturn, particularly the amazing and absolutely massive hexagon-shaped storm which is located at the North Pole. Look at this thing. Isn't the shape of it unbelievable? Let me first mention, though, that hexagon shapes are found naturally in nature, and a few examples include the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, which was created from volcanic activity. We even find hexagons that make up the honeycomb within beehives. Even the spots on giraffes are hexagon in shape. We even see flies and various insects which eyes are made up of hundreds of hexagons too. And when I said that this storm is massive, each of its sides exceeds the diameter of the Earth by 700 miles, and you can see a comparison of it here in this photo. In fact, this storm is 20,000 miles across, or more than 32,000 kilometers across, and has sustained winds of more than 200 miles an hour, or 320 kilometers an hour. But what makes it even more intriguing is the fact that it changes colors, and you can see two separate examples of this between, well, two separate space missions, including the Cassini mission, where this was documented, changing from a blue to a golden color in just a few years. But speaking of changing colors, I have to discuss the false color images that are widely used by NASA, and because of that, the mainstream media as well as academics, and these photos are what are seen by most of the public. False color images are literally artist renditions, and although impressive and beautiful, they are not at all what it actually looks like, and I find this to be detrimental. False color imagery spreads ignorance and misinformation because not everybody knows that these are false colors. I mean, you watching this video might know this and know how to read the fine print and understand it, but you'd be surprised on how many people are unaware of this. And I encourage you to talk to children and people in school and ask them about this stuff, and you'll be surprised on how many of them were taught or shown these photos, but the teachers failed to mention that, oh yeah, some artist added these colors to them. In fact, here's an example of a NASA photo of Ceres, which of course has false coloring, and you'll find this picture right on the nasa.gov website. I would say a prime example of this, though, is the Eagle Nebula, which is also known as the Pillars of Creation. And the famous Eagle Nebula just, well, it doesn't look like this. And this is not to say that it's not spectacular. And if we could travel closer to it and see it with our own eyes, I'm sure our jaws would absolutely drop in amazement. Another example is the famous Hubble telescope photo of 10,000 galaxies, which we've all seen this brilliantly colored photo. But unfortunately, all we truly see is black space and white light. Take the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the closest to the Milky Way galaxy, and this NASA photo is enhanced in so many ways, from the color, certain aspects of its shape, to the very fact that the picture would make you think that we can zoom in and get a really good look at it, which we can't. And here you can see actual examples of what this galaxy looks like through telescopes here on Earth. Clearly much different than the NASA photos released to the public. And this leads me to the topic of black holes. When you see pictures like this, you have to know that it's a complete illustration, because we literally have zero photos of any kind which document a black hole. And most people are not aware of this because, well, we've never actually seen a black hole and we've only been able to infer their presence. But scientists are expecting that this year, 2018, will be the year that we get our very first image of a black hole, so that is exciting. Now I want to jump into the most interesting of all the information, which involves these cosmic coincidences that apparently ancient human civilization was aware of, which is completely unexplainable based on everything we thought we knew or were taught or still being taught about ancient history in school. In prior videos, I have mentioned Randall Carlson and how he details the specific dimensions of the Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt, and how it computes to a ratio of 43,200 to that of planet Earth. And the data suggests that whoever constructed the pyramid literally knew the dimensions of Earth. What we need to look at then is the specific number 432 and how it's been used by multiple ancient civilizations from around the world, including the total years of the Kali Yuga, which is a 432,000 year period. Also, the total years of the Sumerian Kings list, which just so happens to be the same number, 432,000 years. This number also just so happens to be the radius of the sun, 432,000 miles. So it gets interesting when you consider that half the diameter of the sun is 432,000 miles, but half the seconds in a day on Earth is 43,200. Again, you see that 432 number. And obviously the zeros are excluded in the study of numerology, but the examples get more crazy. The moon, for example, is 400 times smaller than the sun, but it also just so happens to be 400 times closer, which is why we get total solar eclipses. Oh, and by the way, these slides are from Randall Carlson, which is how I learned of this information, and I highly recommend that you check out his YouTube channel and his website, and his works on cosmic patterns and cycles of catastrophe, which will blow your mind. And I'll include links in the description of this video, but definitely subscribe to this guy and support him. Definitely go check out his channel. But this leads me into the number 108, and if you divide the average distance of the sun or moon and divide them by their own diameter, you get the same exact number, 108. And we can all thank this perfect ratio for the abundance of life here on Earth. This perfect relationship between the Earth, moon, and sun has fostered the ocean tides to allow life to thrive here on this planet. Now, let's look at the many other examples of the number 108. And just like we looked at the radius of the sun, if you look at the radius of the moon, we also see the numerological number 108 being the 1,080 miles making up the moon's radius. But this is where we see it used abundantly, the number 108, in ancient cultures, civilizations, and religions from across multiple continents from around the world. 108 is significant in the Hindu religion with 108 tantras, and 108 is also the total number of Upanishads. And 108 just so happens to be the amount of beads that are in the mala in Hinduism, yoga, and Tibetan Buddhism, which, by the way, yoga dates back 6,000 years and possibly as long ago as 10,000 years, and that's just what we are aware of. And there's also this example of the 108 towers in Baekeng, Cambodia, which, why did they choose this specific number? Even Homer of the ancient Greeks, who famously authored the Iliad, used the number 108 in his book The Odyssey with 108 suitors. We also see the number 108 in ancient China with the 108 stars of destiny from the famous water margin. So why did so many ancient cultures use the number 108? It's so specific. I mean, it's not like it's a round number like 100, which we could all wrap our minds around. They worship this number, and it just so happens to be the number that represents the ratio involving the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun that has allowed life to thrive here on planet Earth. Don't you find that interesting? Because it is unexplainable why this 108 number is so significant and used so often. And just like the analogy I used in my last video, the telephone game, when information is passed down over time and through translation, information gets lost. But at the foundation of any myth or legend, there is some truth to it. And this number, 108 or 432, is something that I believe was retained but somehow known by the ancients. Another example of this, and I don't think it's an accident or a coincidence at all, but the shape of the building that arguably controls so much of the world today is a pentagon. And what are the inside angles of a pentagon? Well, you guessed it, 108. And they say that they chose the pentagon shape because of how it fits between the roads around it, but yeah, okay, I don't buy it. No other building on Earth is of this shape, and they could have shaped it a million different ways to fit in between these roads. I do believe, or I should say that I know, that there is without a doubt powers that be that exist, a network of people that essentially, well, control the world. Basically a group of leaders that make up various people within governments, intelligence agencies, the news media, the entertainment industry, the scientific community, etc. And some people call them the Illuminati, but call them whatever you want. Without a doubt, there is a network of people that essentially control different sectors of around the world, and these people, I believe, have more information about certain things than the general public. And one example of this is ancient history. Let's use the TV show Lost as an example. You either loved it or hated it. I loved it. You can laugh if you want, but all that aside, this show is absolutely loaded with occult symbolism, and I loved how the show symbolized the nature of reality and our existence, life and death, and how we are a product of our experiences and many other things, including some things about the ancients. And one thing that stands out is the unexplained reason why the show creators chose to use the number 108 throughout the series, and I mean dozens of times, often very discreetly and unnoticeable to most of the audience. For example, there are 108 minutes to reset the hatch clock to save the world from the electromagnetic disaster, and the passcode itself to reset that clock, which, by the way, is also the same exact numbers that Hurley used to win the lottery in the show, and all those numbers just so happen to add up to 108. Obviously, well, not a coincidence, because once you hear just how many other examples this 108 is used in the show. The number 108 showed up on various clocks throughout the show. Even when Jack went to the lighthouse, he had to position the wheel to 108 degrees. Another example is when Doggin was often seen holding a baseball, which involved a scene discussing it, and baseballs just so happen to have 108 stitches. And I would say that this is just a coincidence if it wasn't for the fact that this same guy's hourglass was timed to 108 minutes. Even when Jack was doing surgery on Ben, the ECG briefly showed 108 heartbeats. None of this is an accident. When creating a TV show or a movie, everything is directed and orchestrated. Every frame has intention. And I'm telling you, dozens of examples in this show, most of which were quick and unnoticeable. But other examples include the 108 wine cases at the monastery Desmond was at. Another significant example is that it was 108 days between the crash of the plane, Flight 815, to the rescue of the Oceanic 6. And the date that they were rescued was January 8th, which is 1-08. And there are other examples of this too. These are just a few that I'm sharing, but who was this show created by? Well, J.J. Abrams, who I'm a fan of. He's a great filmmaker. And it turns out he also produced a television show called Fringe, which I've never seen. I'm not familiar with it, but while researching this topic, it turns out that a character named Morgan on the show was passenger number 108 on a flight during some episode. And I've been unable to find an explanation as to why J.J. Abrams likes to quietly throw in this number into so many of his works. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he sits at the cool kids table among various insiders. Who knows? I mean, I think we'll all agree that we live in an age where there's a war on information. And there is without a doubt, and if you've seen my other videos, there is without a doubt significant evidence that proves that the true history of ancient human civilization was far older and far more advanced than we were ever taught in school or they're teaching in school today. And there is, without a doubt, people within the mainstream academic and scientific community trying to suppress this information. And a prime example of this involves a legitimate cover-up involving the Great Sphinx of Giza, Egypt, and tunnels and chambers that exist inside and underneath it. And you have to ask yourself why the authorities have released literally zero photos or videos of any kind of what's inside these tunnels, where they go, and the chambers that they lead to. And I highly recommend that you watch my video on this, because you'll see that the suppression of information is real. And if that's not enough for you, look at how the same network of insiders are attempting to prevent the exploration of the newly discovered pyramid void, a massive chamber found or discovered hidden inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. Like, what does that tell you? So if you're new to this channel or the topic of ancient human civilization, take it upon yourself to research it further, because you will have your mind blown at all the information and data that exists that you were never shown about in school and are somehow left out of mainstream documentaries. But the word is getting out, and people are becoming aware of this information, and it's not an accident that the topic of lost ancient human civilization has skyrocketed in just the last few years. The mainstream establishment narrative is crumbling, and the question becomes, what is it that they don't want the general public to know about ancient human civilization? Why are the most amazing details excluded from academic teachings altogether? Definitely leave a comment to share your thoughts on this topic, but I'm going to close it up there. Hit the like button and subscribe if you're new to this channel, but I have many more videos to come on a whole wide variety of topics. I'm Jimmy, this is Bright Insight. Take care, everybody.